Let's begin. We have an extremely long agenda today, so we're going to try and move through it as expeditiously as possible. Let me begin with agenda item 1, welcome. I have a couple of announcements. But first, I'd like to welcome 2 new members to the council today. Both were appointed by Governor Cuomo and confirmed by the Senate back in June. Patrick Dolan, who is going to be sitting in the trade union seat, and Dominic Marinelli, who is sitting in the disability awareness seat. I'd also like to announce that since the last meeting, we have a new designee for Mayor Rice, Mayor Kennedy. Tom Lucchese. Tom. Let's see, what else? Notice number 1 for the day is let's try and all speak up. As you can see, we already have communications issues going on. So we want Stenographer to be able to hear us. We want the assistant to be able to hear us. We have very good microphones, but loudly and clearly looks great. Finally, let's do a quorum call. So
very good. Let's see. Pat Tebow.
I'm here.
Designee for Secretary of State Rosado. Paul Martin, designee for Brian Stevens, State Fire Administrator.
Here.
Joseph Palazola, designee for Commissioner Rubin, DHER. Designee Keith Wen for Honorable Bill de Blasio.
Here.
Designee Thomas Muchesi, designee for Honorable Judith Kennedy.
Here.
Barbara Rice.
Here.
Honorable Barbara Rice. The Honorable William Tucker.
Here.
Joseph Sauerwein.
Here.
Tim DeRuscher.
Here.
Don Flanagan.
Here.
William Tyne.
Here.
Patrick Dolan.
Here.
Dominic Marinelli.
Here.
That's 13. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Gerard. All right, a quorum being present, we can move on to the discussion and approval of the minutes of June 2nd, 2016. This arrived in your packets late last week. Are there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, I will ask Gerard to call the roll. Sorry, motion to approve. Thanks, Joe. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Moved by Mr. Flanagan, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Marinelli. Voice? Okay. I'm told by council we can do a voice vote, so all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, it's unanimously adopted. Moving on, now we get to see many presentations by our staff. And I know that Nick and Miriam are going to have a very long day, so we'll listen carefully and hopefully move through this. Agenda item number 3, the Uniform Code update. Ask Nick to come up and walk through where we are, give the council the idea of where we're going.
Good morning. At the last co-council meeting, division brought to your attention some errors and typos found in the supplement. At that last meeting, we said that we would collect and analyze all these errors and categorize them, 2 groups. The first group, the corrections will be made via non-substantial amendments to the Uniform Code. These amendments would need to be made prior to the October 3rd effective date. The second group will be substantial revisions. They would have to go through the full notice of proposal making process. So during the course of review, we found more substantial errors than we wanted to. We were hoping to find many amendments and correct the uniform code and the 2016 uniform code supplement that way, but unfortunately, we have a few larger errors than we would have liked. The non-substantial amendments will be discussed later in agenda item, where is it? 6. Thank you. The substantial revisions is the topic of this one. In the interest of saving time and not having too many supplements in circulation, we decided that the best route would be to make 1 or 2 amendments now, not to the supplement, but to 19 NYCRR. The rest of the corrections, the remaining amendments and substantial revisions, they would actually be corrected in the Uniform Code supplement. It's expected that we will present the final list of corrections to the supplement at the November meeting. It appears that we might be on the same track as last year to re-adopt the Uniform Code, being that we'd have maybe, I'm assuming, a March meeting sometime early 2017 to fully re-adopt the supplement. So this meeting here, we're presenting the corrections that we identified to date, and the next meeting, we will have the final list of corrections for the council to vote on. We provided a list of some of these errors. It's maybe a 30-some page PDF. I don't know if you want me to go through all of the errors. I hope not. I can probably just touch base on a few of the bigger ones.
I think that's probably best.
Wonderful. So on your sheets, on your PDF handout that we provided, you'll notice on page 26 of the supplement handout, we have item number 15, which amended section R315.1 of the residential code. The section that we amended actually amended section 315.1. We wanted to amend the whole section. We didn't have any interest in just amending one portion of 315. We wanted the whole section to be revised. This is the carbon monoxide detection requirements. We have our own carbon monoxide detection requirements. They are housed in the amendments to the fire code, section 915. So this is just a clarification that the full requirement is found in the IFC. Another one, not a big one, page 41 of the handout. There was a reference in the residential code to the ICC, International Private Sewage Disposal Code. We did not adopt that, so we had to strike that reference. Again, some of these aren't earth-shattering. Again, we had to follow through with our carbon monoxide detection requirements. There's a requirement in the IBC, section 915, that mandates the ICC carbon monoxide detection requirements. We're not doing that. We had to change that reference to reference the IFC, which was amended by the supplement, to push our New York State carbon monoxide detection requirements. Really, the bigger one seems to be the mistakes that we found in amendments to Chapter 11 of the International Fire Code. What happened is, essentially, I guess, deleted all of Chapter 11 of the International Fire Code and replaced it with our own version. Now, in doing that, we broke a few code paths. As you're probably well aware, different code books reference each other. You can see some of these broken code paths on this color-coded sheet here provided. We have broken code paths in IEBC, IFC, IBC. They all kind of filter through Chapter 11 of the Fire Code. So in order to fix these broken code paths, what we have to do is fully adopt Chapter 11 of the Fire Code, but put shackles on it. See, as I understand it, we were initially scared of fully adopting the IFC Chapter 11 without any restrictions because it has retroactive construction requirements. These requirements could require a building, a static building, not undergoing any form of construction, to have to upgrade the building to certain comparable levels of the adopted building code. So out of that fear of making people fix buildings that aren't broken, we made that change. And in doing that change, we broke things. So in order to fix that, we're going to adopt IFC Chapter 11 and put a few shackles on it to not mandate static buildings to do something. I'll read an excerpt from our correction. We would essentially be revising the scope of Chapter 11. 1101.1 scope. The provisions of this chapter shall apply to existing buildings constructed prior to the adoption of this code. Sections 1103, 1105, and 1106 shall apply to the existing buildings undergoing construction and only to the extent as required by other sections of this code, the IEBC, or the 2015 IBC. Means of egress shall comply with the means of egress requirements 1104. Essentially, we're adopting all of these sections in Chapter 11, but we're going to make them required only when they're required by other code books, the IEBC when you're doing an alteration of some sort, the IBC or other provisions of the IFC. And the other caveat is that the building has to be undergoing some sort of construction. You can't just open up Chapter 11, look at an existing building and say, okay, let's put in standpipes today. They have to physically be doing something to the building. Does this make sense? It was kind of complicated doing this analysis to come to the conclusion that what the fix would be. So in order to follow through with the fix, we would have to really delete all of our Chapter 11 in the supplement. Our Chapter 11 that modified, Chapter 11 of the building code, that would be gone, and we just have short little excerpts to modify certain little provisions here and there in the fire code, much like we did the rest of the codes. And there is another correction I guess I should probably touch base on right now. We'll follow through with it on a further agenda item. There were requirements in the property maintenance code for smoke alarms. The language wasn't clear that it applied to dwellings regulated by the International Residential Code. So when we readopt the supplement, we'll have that language in there, but in the interim, we're going to have a amended notice of adoption to correct this. That correction will not be in the supplement, it will be in NYCRR. Kind of bridge the gap, if that makes sense. And there was a few other items we wanted to touch base on. They weren't necessarily mistakes or errors. Maybe, maybe not. They're on the fringe. Gerardo discussed one, habitable attics. There was this other comment that we had from, I believe, a code enforcement official. The property maintenance code, our definition of weeds. We amended the property maintenance code definition of weeds, but we didn't follow through with previous New York State clarifications. When we had the 2010 codes, we issued a clarification to the definition of weeds. That clarification did not require, well, let me back up a minute. The definition of weeds stated that the requirement for weeds stated that all premises and immediate exterior property shall be maintained free from weeds or plant growth in excess of 10 inches. This current requirement was also a previous New York State requirement that we clarified. We said previously that the premises doesn't necessarily need to be weed-free, just the immediate property area. We issued a clarification on the state website when we adopted the new code. We didn't follow through with that clarification. I don't know if it was discussed at the Code Council meetings in the past, but we had comments come up that people asked if we're supposed to maintain all of our property weed-free or just around the house. So this isn't necessarily a mistake, but we're bringing it to your attention in case you decide you want to correct the supplement to make that clarification. That's really it. Those are some of the bigger ticket items. If anyone has any questions?
Does anyone in Albany have any questions or comments? Seeing none. Anybody in New York City have any questions, comments, or discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I have a question. Yes. So the effective date is going to be October 3rd, and we're not changing that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so the package won't be ready for council voting, the changes, the revised supplement, as well as the rulemaking document won't be ready for council vote until November, though.
Yes, for the substantial revision, we would present the council with a final list of substantial revisions, the revised supplement with red line showing the changes, and I suppose a clean version of the supplement. That will be presented at the next meeting for the council to vote on.
But
So
that
the
would
reason-
be, yeah,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
So that would be after the effective date, which is October 3rd. So administratively, how does that work with the local jurisdiction? Should they be looking at the current supplement without changes, or should
Yes,
they
they
be
have to
looking-
use the current supplement, yes.
I'm just going to jump in here really quickly and note that this is actually the reason why we have a very long agenda today, is because anything that we identified as important to have in place when the code goes live on October 3rd is actually later in this agenda. What Nick's been talking about, basically, we did not feel was super critical to have in place on October 3rd. That's why we're
Yes,
doing
there
it.
next, further agenda item 6. They are the amendments that need to be made right away to the Uniform Code prior to the effective date.
Item 6, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments from New York City? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from Buffalo?
No, I think you answered my question with your response to Mr. Nguyen.
All right. With no others. Okay. All right, so with regard to this was informational, but we're going to, in order to move it forward, put it on track for a notice of proposed in November and a possible adoption in the first meeting of the year, whether that's February or March of 2017. I'm gonna look for a motion right now for the council to give conceptual approvals and codes division.
Should we, I think we might need to fill in, there was this one other item that was added into this, the habitable attic issue, that I was gonna present something on, just to make sure people understood that.
Okay, yeah, that's probably good to do it now, you're right.
Because it's in Nick's text, but we felt like we needed to present that a little bit differently. So, back when the code was adopted, and the intent of the Code Council, and I think it was in,
Oh, we lost Buffalo. Miriam, you call IT and try and get Buffalo back. Thank you all.
Sarah, are you calling in? I was texting him, but I can call him if that would be better. When are you calling him?
Okay. We're gonna stay at these for a minute while we get Buffalo back.
So much easier when we didn't have to do this.
Yeah, they actually have to travel.
People just travel, exactly.
That's just too expensive.
was the intent to speak into law.
Some of this stuff is much confusing.
There we go.
Buffalo, can you hear us?
I don't think we can.
Yes.
Excellent.
Right. We're back. We're good. Back. You're okay.
Okay, we're gonna come back live, and Gerard's gonna continue with a discussion of the habitable attic issue.
So we have everyone?
We have everybody back that can hear us.
Very good. When the Uniform Code was adopted, 2016 Uniform Code was adopted, during the discussions about sprinklers, the the intent was to keep the requirements for automatic sprinkler systems applicable to 1- and 2-family dwellings and townhouses the same as the previous 2010 code. And since that adoption, the division has been working to identify all the substantial amendments, going through documents and looking through previous transcripts. And going through previous transcripts, actually, we found some comments that we thought weren't completely addressed, and that maybe the council was unaware that this provision, this new definition for habitable attics, you knew that it was in here, but I think the effect of it wasn't clear. So that new definition was here in the memo. Habitable attic is a finished or unfinished area not considered a story, complying with the following requirements. Occupiable floor area is not less than 70 square feet in accordance with section 304. Occupiable floor area has a ceiling height in accordance with R305, which is 7 feet minimum, or max minimum. Occupiable space is enclosed by a roof assembly above, knee walls if applicable, on the sides, and floor and ceiling assembly below. Now, the items 1 through 3 in this definition, they're minimum requirements. There are no limitations on area. So a habitable attic, once it meets the minimum requirements, can be as big as anybody wants it to be. One thing that we're concerned is that houses with 3 levels above grade plane can be built without automatic sprinkler systems. For example, a dwelling with 2 stories above grade plane plus a habitable attic would have 3 levels above grade plane. And since a habitable attic is not considered a story, our current requirements found in R313, automatic sprinkler systems of the 2016 Uniform Code Supplement, would regulate that house as 2 stories and not trigger the requirement for a sprinkler system. And the 2010 codes would have regulated that same house as a 3-story structure, and automatic sprinkler systems would be required. Now, I've got an illustration that I hope the Code Council members all receive and maybe have access to at the different venues. But in this illustration, I guess I'll walk through the illustration quick. What I've done is at the top of the page, I've identified what the 2010 code would require for the building you're looking at in the illustration, and at the bottom, the 2016 residential code, how that would regulate it. Of course, the first one is very simple. You've got a basement below grade and 2 stories. Both of them regulate them as a 2-story building, and there would be no sprinkler system required. The second one, where you've got a basement that's high enough out of the ground that it's now considered a story above grade plane, is actually a 3-story building, and the 2010 code considers it 3 stories and sprinklers are required, and so does the 2016 code. And when we go to item C, we have a basement that's below grade, 2 stories above grade, plus a habitable attic. Really 3 levels above grade, the same as the one just before it, where levels that are habitable with people in there sleeping, most likely. The 2016 residential code, with the definition in the code the way it's written, would consider that still a 2-story building, and there would be no sprinklers. In the 2010 code would have considered that a 3-story building, and there would have been sprinklers. And the next 2 are simply to illustrate both of those would be considered something that had to be sprinklered in both the old code and the current new code. And it just indicates that you can have this habitable attic at levels above grade that are beyond what we normally would have required in the past. But in keeping the definition, we would be staying with what the ICC had intended, but we would be comfortable that they would be sprinklered spaces. Now, the proposed amendments in that same package that Nick just proposed, we've indicated some changes. We kept the definition, identifying a habitable attic, but what we've done is we've changed some subsequent parts of our supplement. So we're not changing the IRC in this, we're changing the supplement. And when we talk about in R313, townhouses, automatic fire sprinkler system, we say townhouses having a height of, what it typically said before was townhouses having a height of 3 stories above grade shall be equipped throughout with an automatic sprinkler system. So again, that would have missed the habitable attic, which is not considered a story. So we changed it to read townhouses having a height of 2 stories above grade plane and the habitable attic, or 3 stories above grade plane, shall be equipped throughout with an automatic sprinkler system. And we did the same verbiage. Nope.
Stand to ease for a second. Now they're back. Buffalo, you can hear us? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we did, if you heard, and you're looking in the information that you had, we changed the verbiage for townhouses and 1 and 2 family dwellings to indicate that 2 stories above grade plane plus a habitable attic would get a sprinkler system. And we went on to change a couple of other sections in the I believe it is in the oh yeah, Appendix J, I'm sorry. Appendix J, which is for existing buildings, we've changed wherever it's appeared in there to have a similar effect to make sure that going forward, any building that has 2 stories plus a habitable attic or more would have sprinkler systems. So essentially, this agenda item is, intended to obtain a conceptual approval along with the rest of the substantial changes that the Code Council can, to allow the division to make the correction and move forward with rulemaking. Now, there were a couple of other questions that, particularly, I think Tim DeRuscher was one of the people who asked about habitable attics, particularly how the new definition would affect automatic sprinkler systems, protection for dwellings categorized under the new definition, lodging houses. In the 2016 Uniform Code Supplement, section 10121, the residential code, exception 3 is for lodging houses. Exception 3 states, owner-occupied lodging houses with 5 or fewer guest rooms shall be permitted to be constructed in accordance with the IRC when equipped with a fire sprinkler system in accordance with section P2904 of the 2015 IRC. Therefore, the lodging houses constructed under the residential code will be protected by automatic sprinkler systems. And that's it.
Thank you, Gerard. Are there any questions or comments from Albany? Mr. DeRuscher.
Yes, I have a couple questions or a couple concerns. Certainly that was one of the items I think I brought up probably my first meeting on how this habitable attic issue is going to be taken care of, and it looks like the proposed changes would address those. But I have a couple of questions that I would like the staff to look at. That there seems to be a difference in some definitions between the 2010 version of the code and the 2015-16 version, specifically as it refers to above the grade plane versus above grade. The definitions are in fact different, and I'm concerned that there may be some unintended consequences with those definitions being different from code 2010 to 2015 definition. I think the language that's been proposed here with it in the illustration clearly shows that there was an error in being able to address that habitable attic issue, but I think there may be some circumstances where we may be into some basements that are actually above grade as defined in the previous version versus above the grade plane as defined now. So that may be a substantial change. I don't know. I would like that to be looked at, and I think it's a concern we need to deal with. And if it is a substantial one, I think it deserves the full-blown scrutiny of everyone that's interested in this specific topic because it is such an interest to many parties.
Just as a comment, that term started creeping into the ICC codes a few years back, and there was, I think, confusion, especially with the story above grade situation. There's also a change in the definition of basement, too.
Correct.
Because of that confusion, where they wanted to make it clear that a basement is not, they don't refer to it as a basement more. A basement is a story that is not a story above grade plane.
Right.
So it clarifies when a basement, as it's coming up out of the ground, all of a sudden becomes a story once the distance from the grade plane, which is the average grade plane, to the top of the first floor above is more than 6 feet.
I agree, but there are some differences when it talks about the number of sides of a 1 or 2 family or a townhouse that in fact could be, in some circumstances, with differences in grade from the front to the rear of the building, or that may end up not being treated as a story. I guess
Right.
that's my point. I think it deserves specific
Okay.
scrutiny and review to make sure that we don't end up with, looks like a 3-story building to me, but by definition, it's really not a 3-story building, when anybody that's reasonable would take a look at that and say, how could this not be 3 stories?
Right. And do you have specific things that you can send on to us?
I do.
Specific items?
You know, we only received these a couple days ago. and
Sure.
I've been out on business trying to get some other things done, and just happened to see that one thing, because that was one of the first things on the agenda, so.
That's something that we've been attempting to clarify, and I believe ICC's been attempting to become more clear on over the past several code cycles.
And that actually is what happens when you start messing around with code languages. It's already been changed, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments from Albany? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from New York City? Seeing none. Any questions or comments from Buffalo? Seeing none. Okay. Okay, now, we'll move on to the motion phase here. So I'm looking for a motion from the council. I'll read this to make sure I get it right. To give conceptual approval to the Codes Division to prepare final rule text and rulemaking documents, to present those at the November meeting, and then move forward with requesting all required approvals, filing a notice of proposed rulemaking, and taking additional steps to present the rule for adoption in the first meeting of 2017. Can I have someone make that motion?
So moved.
Mr. Flanagan makes the motion. Second? Mr. Sauerwein seconds.
On the question,
Sorry, who was that?
Bill Tyne in Buffalo.
Hi, Bill. Sorry, I couldn't see you there.
It's
Bill,
all right.
Go ahead.
Well, I guess it goes back to Mr. Wendt's comment earlier. If this is a substantial change and it's not going to take effect until after the new year in 2017, how does the code go live in every other respect now? Is this just one item that is not going to be enforceable until next year?
Yes. Unfortunately,
Okay.
that's just based on timing. That's the only way we can do it.
Okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion that's been made and seconded. I'll ask Gerard to call the roll.
Okay. Matt Pivo.
Aye.
Paul Martin.
Yes.
Joseph Palozzo.
Yes.
Keith Wen.
Yes.
Thomas Luchesi.
Yes.
Barbara Rice.
Yes.
William Tucker.
Aye.
Joseph Sauerwein.
Yes.
Tim DeRusha.
Yes.
John Flanagan.
Yes.
William Tyne,
Yes.
Patrick Dolan,
Yes.
Dominic Leonelli.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion carries. Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 4. A discussion of changes to the IRC Appendix C with regard to manufactured housing. Gerard, is this you or Nick? Or?
This is going to be Bill Sherman.
Bill Sherman, welcome to the Code Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. My name's William Sherman. I'm one of the code compliance specialists on staff. I act as the administrator for the manufactured housing program, as well as some duties within the inspection unit. So they've asked me to bring to you a draft of Appendix E and some changes that are needed due to a review of our program by HUD. The state's manufactured housing installation program is certified by HUD. Part of our recent renewal process was a review of our code, practices, and policies. We gained an initial 1-year approval of our program, and HUD recommended some changes, including these changes to Appendix E. So that being said, I believe you all received a copy of the draft in your packet, a cover memo. Do you have any questions of me?
Bill, can you just take us very quickly through your cover memo, just so that everyone's got
Would you like me to read it, Mr. Chairman?
You could summarize, that'd be great.
Don't read it word for word. Okay. In June, we received a letter from HUD, as I mentioned. The letter directed the division to update the state's manufactured home installation standards to at least be equivalent to the HUD model installation standard, which is addressed in Title 24 of the Code of Federal Rules and Regulations 3285. In order to meet this requirement, it's necessary for the division to update Appendix E of the 2015 Residential Code as amended by the 2016 supplement. Attached were the revisions. The proposed revision will amend Appendix E to bring into alignment with the HUD standard, as I said, required manufactured homes to be installed in accordance with manufacturer's installation manual, requiring relocated manufactured homes, those being used manufactured homes and mobile homes, to be installed to an updated installation standard of NFPA 225. We currently use the ANSI 1994 version of that standard. Remove some conflicting language as well. We are continuing to review number 3 in that proposal, the use of the NFPA 2017-225, as to whether or not it's needed with a reference to the model install standard.
Are there any questions or comments from Albany? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from New York City? Seeing none. Any questions or comments from Buffalo? Seeing none. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm looking for a motion on this to grant conceptual approval to the Codes Division to prepare final rule text and rulemaking documents to obtain required approvals to propose the rule, filing a notice of proposed rulemaking, conducting one or more public hearings, preparing an analysis of public comments to be received, and coming back to the Code Council at a next meeting in November for a vote, possibly on final adoption. So moved by Mr. Flanagan. Second? Seconded by Ms. Rice. I will ask Gerard to call the roll.
Mantivo?
Oh, wait, one second.
I'm sorry.
Just because we had it last time, I just want to check. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay.
Has there been any, this is Bill Tyne in Buffalo, has there been any analysis in terms of the cost of these revisions to this section?
Bill is shaking his head at me, so I'm going to say no.
So how do we, this is very much an affordable housing issue when you're talking about this type of housing. And if we're changing design standards, taking it away from registered design professionals and putting it in alternative standards, I'd kind of like to know what the implications are of that in terms of cost. It's very relevant when you're talking about affordable housing that's offered in a lot of places upstate, in a lot of the rural areas. This is a very prominent form of housing for people, and I'd be very concerned what the implications are, and then that weighed against safety issues. That these are things that I don't think are clear in the ordinance here, in the regulations. The code.
Okay.
At least not to me.
Understand where you're coming from. Why don't I ask the Codes Division to prepare such an analysis before the November meeting, and certainly before we, as a council, will adopt it.
I appreciate that.
Mr. Sauerwein?
I do have a comment on that. And I think perhaps, while Mr. Tynes' concerns are very valid, substantially, we don't have very much of a choice, do we? We have been directed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's going to increase construction or not, and how much it may increases, I think is, while it's a valid point, there's nothing we can do about it. So in my opinion, I think we might as well process this motion at this time and be done with it.
Well said.
It may in fact reduce the cost by use of new technologies too. We don't know.
Federal housing.
Well, I agree. I think we should move forward with this motion, and I also do agree that we should probably have some understanding when we finally vote about what the cost is. But your point is well made and taken. Council points out correctly that there has to be a cost analysis done as part of any rulemaking process. So it will be done. Are there any other questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none. Go ahead, Joe. Rory.
Okay. Matt Tebow.
Aye.
Paul Martin.
Yes.
Joseph Colosso.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Keith Wynn.
Yes.
Thomas Luchesi.
Yes.
Wade Tucker.
Yes.
Joseph Sauerwein.
Yes.
Skip Barbara Rice.
Yes.
Thank you. Tim DeRusher.
Yes.
John Flanagan.
Yes.
William Tyne.
Yes.
Patrick Dolan.
Yes.
Tom Whitmer.
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, that moves us to agenda item number 5, temporary alternative use of certain buildings. A change to 19 NYCR Part 1228. And Nick's going to come up and walk us through the new version.
At the last co-council meeting, we presented a draft rule that was proposed to the council a few years back. At the time, it was originally intended to aid maple syrup producers to allow them the benefit of hosting events such as pancake breakfasts in their facilities. It was eventually expanded to include other agricultural uses, and then it further grew to include other uses. So this was heard by the co-council, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago at the last time, or prior times, and then at the last council meeting it was revised and brought back. Since then, we spoke to Department of Labor and OFPC about the rule. The OFPC was very helpful in pointing out some corrections that we can make, enhancements to the rule, and we took their comments into consideration and moved forward with them. The rule today is essentially the same rule that the council heard at the last meeting, but a little beefed up. So some of the changes that we made to this rule, some of the bigger changes that I think we made to the rule are the uses. We heard public comments in the past, several years ago, that the groups that we proposed would allow uses such as airplane hangars, parking garages, the various other buildings to host these events. Point was well taken. They probably shouldn't be allowed to host these events. So what we did is, instead of just specifying the use groups that would be allowed to host these events, such as Group A, B, F1, F2, and S, we further expanded upon it to state that more or less airplane hangars and parking garages cannot be allowed to use these buildings to host certain events. So that seems to be one of the bigger changes that we made. So we put some restrictions on what buildings could host alternative functions. Another one of the bigger ticket items that we changed was the structural evaluation of ag buildings and analysis of existing and proposed floor loads. Tim, I believe you may have commented on this last time. So this requirement would be up front under inspections. It would authorize the code enforcement official to make that request if he determines it is necessary. Other items include fireworks. Before, in the prior text, we had a requirement for fireworks to comply with New York State requirements. We changed the section completely. We're now not allowing fireworks anywhere within 20 feet of the building. You cannot have fireworks in the building or within 20 feet of the building. We also have a new requirement for carbon monoxide detection and smoke alarms. Many buildings right now, A's, B's, M's, they would probably have carbon monoxide and smoke alarm detectors in them, but agricultural buildings would not. Storage buildings would not. So we have provisions in this new rule that would require it. Another item would be fire apparatus access roads. Public safety plans for when fire apparatus access roads are not provided. These plans shall be submitted to the code enforcement official upon permit application. So essentially it was the same rule, but it has been enhanced. We have made additional safety features mandatory, and we would like the Code Council's thoughts and comments on where we have taken this rule.
Okay, any discussion or questions from Albany? Mr. Sauerwein.
A tremendous amount of work has been put forth. However, we just spent some significant portion of 13 years doing away with the Green Book, the old uniform code, because it became unwieldy. And now, in effect, what we're doing is bringing it back. The original concept of the sugar shack use, which was a very limited use, that made sense. And I was in favor of that with those relatively few restrictions that were placed upon, or proposed to be placed upon. Now we've opened this whole thing up. We're going to have another building code. We have the building construction code, we have the residential code, we have the existing building code, and now we're going to have the code for people who don't want to do it anyway but their way. And I'm opposed to that. I would rather see us go back to the original concept of the sugar shack and let this situation be developed on a national level by the ICC, where it'll be much more widely vetted. I just have a problem with this, and well, the folks from the Department of State and from OFPC know how much they tried to cover, to put in there all of the eventualities, and they're still not all there, I would imagine. So I think we're headed in the wrong direction. We have made a 180 and headed back to the old Green Book. That's my opinion.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Sarowine. Anybody else from Albany that would like to speak? Mr. Royce?
Yeah, I've noted in here a number of different attempted protection issues, water supplies and smoke alarms, and we're restricting this to certain types of buildings. I have to reiterate my concern on having this homegrown text also to address whatever problem there may or may not be. I don't know what that is, but certainly the application of smoke alarms in something other than residential buildings, which is against what the adopted code standard NFPA 72 reads. The use of those smoke alarms, I fear, will end up just being there to make us feel good. May work in the beginning. There's no real provisions for testing or transmissions of alarms. We're talking battery-operated type of devices. If we're talking, these facilities, which in my mind could be rather large, to not require what the building code requires for proper fire alarm systems and a fire alarm control panel or wireless systems that are available today for ease of use. I think we're going backwards in here too. We wouldn't allow this in a new building that was built for an assembly space, and yet we're the ones that are saying, oh, here's this language, just go ahead and use this type of system, where it's not even a system in this case here. So I think the limited time that I've had to look at this, there's a very broad context here on what this could apply to. And while the discussion here has been the small little, the maple syrup kind of facilities or something else, what I've seen in my career is the application of these rules or regulations that are broadly used and go well beyond what the original intent was. And I think limiting to specific occupancies in certain cases could actually be worse than saying in an aircraft hangar where you have a lot of space for people to get out and other features here. So my own opinion is I think this is not a good regulation, and I think we're going backwards. I'd have to agree with Mr. Selrine.
Thank you, Mr. Royce. Anyone else from Albany that would like to speak? Okay. Moving on to New York City. Anybody from New York City that would like to speak on this? Hearing none. Anybody from Buffalo who has a comment or question on this? Hearing none. Okay. Well, I'm going to seek a motion from the council to give consensual approval to the Codes Division to prepare the final rule text and the rulemaking documents associated, to obtain the required approvals, to propose a rule, to file a notice of proposed rulemaking, to conduct public hearings as necessary, to prepare an analysis of those public comments that are received, and to come back to the council at the next meeting for a possible notice of adoption. Do I have someone to make that motion?
I'm not so much in favor of it, but I'll make the motion so we see what comes back. Okay. That's the only way. I want to make it that way.
Okay. Mr. Flanagan makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second
Ms. Rice seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion with what Mr. Flanagan said already on the record? Ms. Martin.
While it's noted that Fire Prevention and Control was involved in development of this, we did take an active part. At this point, we still have some additional comments that we'd like to have an ongoing dialogue with the Department of State about. We'll do that during the rulemaking process as it goes forward.
Okay. Anyone else from Albany? Any comments on the motion from New York City? Any comments on the motion from Buffalo? Hearing none. Gerard, if you could call the roll, please.
Matt Eagle,
I'll vote aye.
Paul Martin,
Yes.
Joseph Elozoff,
Yes.
Keith Wynn,
No.
Thomas Luchesi,
No.
Barbara Rice,
Yes.
William Tucker,
No.
Joseph Sauerland,
No.
Tim DeRusher,
No.
John Flanagan,
Yes.
William Tang,
No.
Patrick Dolan,
No.
Dominic Marinelli.
No.
Motion does not carry.
Motion does not carry.
Are there any other motions? Hearing none, this is tabled until the next meeting. Moving on to agenda item number 6, smoke alarms. Change to 19 NYCRR Part 1226. Gerard, are you doing this or Nick?
Could you go ahead and do this?
I hope this one goes better.
Shower?
I just want to be perfectly clear. The problem with the previous action was not in the presentation or the preparation. It was just in the whole concept. So please don't take it.
No, I don't, I understand.
Thank you.
No Christmas card. So as I stated before, we found some errors in the supplement. The errors that we identified as non-substantial amendments would have to be corrected now. Chopped them all up and we isolated them, and we found 2 that are really necessary. The first error is in 19 NYCRR Part 1220. I believe it was the, more or less requirements for townhouses. It was something Tim was talking about earlier, the grade plane versus grade, that definition, that terminology. It was correctly phrased in the supplement. It wasn't correctly phrased in the actual rule text. So we're amending the rule text to make that correction. That way, everything matches. The other error was in, as I said before, the property maintenance code. It didn't explicitly say that smoke alarms shall be installed and maintained in all dwellings regulated by the IRC. So we are amending the rule text, not the supplement. We're amending the actual rule text, 19 NYCRR Part 1226, to house that requirement. It will be a placeholder until the supplement is revised and readopted. At that point, it will be eaten up and incorporated into the supplement. This is not a new requirement. This is a requirement that we're trying to carry over from the 2010 codes, old code requirements. So it's not something new. We've been doing it for a long time. We want to continue to do it. That's it.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the council in Albany? Okay, hearing none. Any questions or comments from New York City? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from Buffalo? Okay. Hearing none. I'll call on Mr. Flanagan.
I'll make the following motion. I move that, 1, the Code Council finally determined that the amendment of the State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code, the Uniform Code, be implemented by the adoption of the amended rule identified in item agenda 6, Uniform Code Update, non-substantial amended notice of adoption. Will not have a significant environmental impact and will not have a significant adverse effect on any significant fish or wildlife habitat, scenic resources of statewide significance, important agricultural land, or area included in an approved local waterfront revitalization program, and that 2, that Gerard Hathaway authorized to sign and deliver with respect to such amended rule adoption, the State Environmental Quality Review Short Environmental Assessment. B, the State Environmental Quality Review Negative Declaration. C, the New York State Department of State Coastal Management Program Coastal Assessment Form, and a certificate of no significant coastal impact. So moved.
We have a motion on the table. Can I have a second, please? Seconded by Mr. Lucchese. Is there any comments, questions on the motion? Hearing none. I will ask Gerard to call the roll.
Matino.
Aye.
Omar.
Yes.
Joseph Lozla.
Yes.
Keith Wen.
Yes.
Thomas Lucchese.
Yes.
Barbara Rice.
Yes.
William Tucker.
Aye.
Joseph Sauerwein.
Yes.
Tim DeRusha.
Yes.
Tom Flanagan.
Yes.
William Tyne.
Yes.
Patrick Dolan.
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
It carries.
Motion carries. All right, moving on.
Here's a second motion.
Oh, sorry, there's a second motion. Mr. Flanagan.
Yes.
Sorry.
A rule that the original rule to amend the State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code, the Uniform Code, was approved by the Code Council on March 9th, 2016. The notice of adoption of the original rule was published in the State Register on April 6, 2016. The effective date of the original rule is scheduled to be October 3rd, 2016. The Code Council has been presented with an amended rule that would amend the original rule by 1, clarifying the height limitation on townhouses that are subject to the 2015 International Residential Code, and 2, adding a provision relating to the installation of smoke alarms in the existing residential buildings described in the new section 704.3 to be deemed to be added to the 2015 International Property Maintenance Code by section 1226(1)D of the amended rule. I move that the Code Council find and determine that for the purpose of the State Administrative Procedure Act, the changes made to the original rule by the amended rule do not constitute a substantial revision of the original rule. 2, that the amended rule in the form of the NYCRR text presented at this meeting be approved. 3, that the Code Council find and determine, pursuant to Executive Law Section 378(15)A, that makes the amended rule and the changes to the Uniform Code to be made by the amended rule effective on October 3rd, 2016, rather than 90 days after the date of publication of the amended notice of adoption in the State Register is necessary to protect health, safety, and security, because delaying the effective date of the changes to the Uniform Code made by the amended rule until 90 days after publication of the amended notice of adoption would not necessarily delay the effective date of all the improvements made to the Uniform Code by the original rule and by the amended rule. 4, that pursuant to Executive Law Section 378(15)A, the amended rule and the changes made to the Uniform Code by the amended rule will be effective on October 3rd, 2016, and that the Code Council direct, pursuant to Executive Law Section 378(15)B, that in the transition period between the adoption of the amended rule and October 3, 2016, the date of which the amended rule and the changes made to the Uniform Code by the amended rule become effective, a person shall have the option to comply with either the provisions of the Uniform Code as changed by the amended rule or with the provisions of the Uniform Code as in effect immediately prior to the adoption of the amended rule. So moved.
We have a motion on the table by Mr. Flanagan. Can I have a second, please?
I'm sorry, may I add
skip something?
something here? No, you didn't skip something. I think I may have skipped something, and I apologize for that. And Mr. Flanagan, if you would amend your second motion to say that the Code Council adopt the amendment.
I will make an amendment to my motion that the Code Council adopt the amendment. Thank you.
We have an amended motion on the table. Can I have a second for the amended motion? Second by Mr. Sauerland and Ms. Lucchese. Is there any discussion on the second motion as amended? Hearing none. Can you please call the roll when you're ready?
Yes.
Thank you.
Pat Tebow.
Aye.
Paul Martin.
Yes.
Joseph Lozola.
Yes.
Keith Wynn.
Yes.
Thomas Lucchese.
Yes.
William Tucker.
Aye.
Barbara Reddick.
Yes.
Joseph Sauerland.
Yes.
Tim DeRush.
Yes.
John Flanagan.
Yes.
William Tyne.
Yes.
Patrick Dolan.
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Motion carries. Okay, moving to the next agenda item. We're up to number 7, so halfway there. Technical amendments to 19 NYCRR Parts 1264 and 1265. Urgency notice of adoption and a proposed rulemaking.
Okay.
Gerard.
The Division of Building Standards and Codes has substantially the task of identifying. No, sorry, didn't turn the page. The 19 NYCRR Part 1264 implements the Executive Law 382A, which requires all commercial and industrial structures utilizing truss-type construction to be marked by a sign or symbol in a manner sufficient to warn persons conducting fire control and other emergency operations of the existence of truss construction in the structure. 19 NYCRR Part 1265 implements the Executive Law 382B, requiring that any person utilizing truss-type, pre-engineered wood, or timber construction for the erection of any new residential structure, for any addition to an existing structure, or for any rehabilitation of existing residential structure, saying that they must notify local government that will issue the building permit that the truss-type, pre-engineered wood, or timber construction is being utilized, affix a sign or symbol to the electric box, if any, on the exterior of the structure indicating the truss, pre-engineered wood, or timber construction has been used. Both of these rules contain references and terminology that will become effective on October 3rd, 2016, the effective date of the newly adopted Uniform Code. For example, the current version of 19 NYCRR Part 1264B references the Building Code of New York State. Of the state of New York State. The corrected rule must reference the 2015 International Building Code as amended by the 2016 Uniform Code Supplement. The Division of Building Standards and Codes is proposing a notice of emergency adoption and proposed rulemaking to make the necessary corrections to 19 NYCRR Parts 1264 and 1265 to ensure their effectiveness. The proposed rule text and rulemaking documents attached are intended for open discussion voting by the council. These two rules were already in effect under the last code, and some of the work that's been done here is to allow them to continue on and be referenced correctly.
Thank you, Gerard. Are there any questions or comments from Albany? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from New York City? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from Buffalo? Hearing none. Okay, I will call on Mr. Flanagan.
I would move that the Code Council find and determine that the adoption of the rule identified in Agenda Item 7, Technical Amendment to the 19 NYCRR Parts 1264 and 1265, Emergency Notice of Adoption and Proposed Rulemaking, will not have a significant environmental impact, will not have a significant adverse effect on any significant fish or wildlife habitat, scenic resource, or statewide significance, important agricultural land or area included in an approved local waterfront revitalization program, and that Gerard Hathaway be authorized to sign and deliver with respect to such emergency adoption and proposed rulemaking. A, that the State Environmental Quality Review Act Short Environmental Assessment Form. B, the State Environmental Quality Review Active Negative Declaration. And C, the New York State Department of State Coastal Management Program Coastal Assessment Form, and the Certificate of No Significant Coastal Impact. So moved.
We have a motion on the table. Can I have a second, please? Mr. Lucchese has seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Gerard, if you would please call the roll.
Okay. Matt Tebow.
Aye.
Paul Martin.
Yes.
Joseph Palooza.
Yes.
Keith Wynn.
Yes.
Thomas McKenzie.
Yes.
Barbara Rice.
Yes.
William Tucker.
Aye.
Joseph Sauerland.
Yes.
Tim DeRusha.
Yes.
John Flanagan.
Yes.
William Towns.
Yes.
Patrick Dolan.
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries. That's the first motion.
That's the first.
That's the first motion. Mr. Flanagan. I'm ready.
I would move that the Code Council find and determine that the adoption of the rule identified in Agenda Item 7, Technical Amendments to 19 NYCRR Parts 1264 and 1265, Emergency Notice of Adoption and Proposed Rulemaking, on an emergency basis as authorized by Section 202 of the State Administrative Procedure Act, is required to preserve public safety and general welfare because A, in the absence of this rule, the existing references in Parts 1264 and 1265 to provisions in the current revision of the Uniform Code will become obsolete on October 3rd, 2016, when the amended and updated version of the Uniform Code becomes effective. And B, a non-emergency rule cannot be approved and adopted prior to October 3, 2016. And C, amending Part 1264, 1265 in the manner contemplated by this rule prior to October 3, 2016 is necessary to minimize confusion on the part of the regulated parties who need to comply with the Parts 1264 and 65 and the authorized authorities having jurisdiction responsible for the enforcement of Part 1264 and 1265. And the rule identified in Agenda Item 7, Technical Amendments, the 12 NYCRR Parts 1264, 1265, Emergency Notice of Adoption and Proposed Rulemaking, be adopted as an emergency rule to be effective on October 3rd, 2016. So moved.
We have a motion on the table. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Martin. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll ask Gerard to call the roll.
Okay. Matt Tebow.
Aye.
Paul Martin.
Yes.
Joseph Palooza.
Yes.
Keith Wynn.
Yes.
Thomas Luchesi,
Yes.
Barbara Wright,
Yes.
William Tucker,
Aye.
Joseph Salzwein,
Yes.
John Hamlin. Oh, I'm sorry, Tim DeRusha,
Yes.
John Flanagan,
Yes.
William Tyne,
Yes.
Patrick Dolan,
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, non-substantial updates to the energy code. Next adoption, I believe I am calling on Miriam.
At the last Code Council meeting, we gave conceptual approval to amended rule to make non-substantial changes to the energy code as adopted in March. Using a simplified amendment process that only allows minor adjustments and no substantial changes, and that's, becomes important why we sent to you both A and B versions. This amended rule replaces the original supplement with a revised supplement that was published in August rather than in March. The two versions, A includes all the changes described in the summary of proposed changes sent to you, and that includes R25 cavity only option for buildings in climate zone 6. Well, B omits that particular change and has all other changes. The code division staff, we looked at the cavity only option for climate zone 6 to determine, and we determined it was a minor and not substantial change. The reason for that is because those buildings can pass through res check rather than this prescriptive path. So there is a path where the buildings pass. We're just providing this option within the prescriptive method. Using res check, in fact, may result in less energy efficient buildings as a side. But so for that reason, and also looking at what we did is we included this option that we're adding was done in Vermont, and we also looked at the documents that Vermont prepared to show this as being equivalent and a non-substantial change. Based on that, we recommend that the Code Council determine that version A is non-substantial, including that prescriptive path for climate zone 6 to have it a cavity only insulation option with insulation of R25. And I'd like to also point out that of the 6 states that have adopted IECC, none has adopted the provisions for climate zone 6 with this with the prescriptive table without doing some adjustment to this to allow this method in Vermont or to bring all of their in the case of Washington, they deemed their counties in climate zone 5 instead of climate zone 6 to avoid this provision. If the Code Council determines otherwise, then we would recommend adopting version B, which has all the other changes. I'm highlighting that change first because that's the difference in the two versions sent to you. The other changes are basically editorial changes, so like we changed the numbering, we corrected a formula. We made corrections to some mislabeled sections and references. We made a correction to clarify that when we changed the section, the subordinate provisions are not changed because some people called with questions about that. We adjusted the compliance path through the energy anyway, the compliance path in 401.6 of the residential provisions to clarify that mandatory provisions throughout the rest of that chapter are required.
Thank you, Miriam. Let's see if there's any discussion or questions for Miriam. Anybody in Albany? Mr. DeRoche.
So, the IECC essentially prescriptively provides the requirement for cavity walls only and would not necessarily allow log homes with better windows and other type of things to be used unless you went through the alternative method.
Well, this doesn't adjust log homes. This effect, we did not make a change to allow log homes.
Okay. Does this affect that?
This will not affect log homes. Log homes can still pass in the res check method, which by the way is more a clearer path in New York State than in the IECC. But you would have to do a log home. You would have to have large windows. 26% of your walls would have to be windows, which would probably be less energy efficient than having small windows. But however, we didn't address log homes. That would still be a substantial change.
Are there any other questions or comments from Albany? Hearing none.
Thank you.
New York City, any questions or comments?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Wen. Go ahead.
So, are we being asked to consider version A, that this new compliance method being included as a non-substantial change?
Yeah.
Is there any guidelines or reference that we can look at to consider, what defines substantial and non-substantial?
Council. I'll ask council.
Yes, there is. It's in the State Administrative Procedure Act, which I have not committed to memory.
Okay.
But
So-
if you wish, I could leave for 5 minutes and come back and read you the definition of substantial revision. I will predict it will not be helpful.
But
to summarize, if you look at the entire rule that you've adopted, the change you're making, does it have a big impact on the entire rule that you've adopted? And considering that we have adopted an entire energy code, to make a change that would give people an additional option when they have cavity walls in climate zone 6, an additional option which they essentially already have in the sense they could use the same type of insulation and pass the res check method. I think saying that is not a substantial change to the entire energy code, I could say that with a very straight face.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying is that the outcome will be the same, whether we have this additional allowance or not. It's just that it's going to streamline the process more by having it. So because the end result is the same, it's non-substantive.
I want to make sure the technical people who know what they're talking about agree with that. But.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from New York City? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from Buffalo? Hearing none.
I guess the consensus is we'll consider the option for version A.
Version A. So I will ask Mr. Flanagan to make a motion.
I think there's two motions.
Yes.
This is the amended notice of adoption emergency code update, version A. I I move that the Code Council find and determine that the amendment of the State Energy Conservation Construction Code, the Energy Code, to be implemented by the adoption of the amended rule identified in Agenda Item 8, Energy Code Update Non-Substantial, amended notice of adoption. A, will not have a significant environmental impact, and B, will not have a significant adverse effect on any significant fish or wildlife habitat, scenic resource of statewide significance, important agricultural land, or area included in an approved local waterfront revitalization program. And 2, that Gerard Hathaway be authorized to sign and deliver with respect to such amended rule adoption. A, the State Environmental Quality Review Act short environmental assessment form. B, the State Environmental Quality Review Act negative declaration. And C, the New York State Department of State Coastal Management Program coastal assessment form. And D, the certificate of no significant coastal impact. So moved.
We have a motion on the table. Can I have a second, please?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Ms. Rice. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Gerard, please call the roll.
Matt Tebow.
Aye.
Paul Martin.
Yes.
Joseph Palumbo.
Yes.
Keith Wynn. Thomas McChesney.
Yes.
Barbara Rice.
Yes.
William Tucker.
Aye.
Joseph Sauerwein.
Yes.
Tim DeRuscher.
Yes.
John Flanagan.
Yes.
William Tyne.
Yes.
Patrick Dolan.
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Mr. Flanagan. Round 2.
Second motion, round 2, thank you. A rule that the original rule to amend the State Energy Conservation Construction Code in the Energy Code was approved by the Code Council on March 9, 2016. The notice of adoption of the original rule was published in the State Register on April 6, 2016. The effective date of the original rule is scheduled to be October 3, 2016. The original rule incorporated by reference the publication entitled the 2016 Supplement of the New York State Energy Conservation Construction Code, the 2016 Energy Code Supplement. Code Council has been presented with the amendment rule that would amend the original rule by incorporating by reference version A of the 2016 Energy Code Supplement, revised August 2016, by incorporating by reference that revised version of the 2016 Energy Code Supplement. The amended rule will make several changes to the version of the Energy Code that would become effective on October 3rd, 2016, pursuant to the original rule. I move, 1, that the Code Council find and determine that for the purpose of the State Administrative Procedure Act, the changes made to the original rule by the amended rule do not constitute substantial revisions to the original rule. 2, that the amended rule in the form of the NYCRR text presented at this meeting, which incorporated by references, revision A of the 2016 Energy Supplement, revised August 16, 2016, be approved, and that the amendment rule and changes be made to the Energy Code by the amendment rule shall take effect on October 3rd, 2016. So moved.
There's a motion on the table. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Martin. Mr. Sauerwein? Any discussion on this motion? Hearing none. Gerard, please call the roll.
Matt Tebow.
Aye.
Paul Martin.
Yes.
Joseph Palumbo.
Yes.
Keith Wynn.
Yes.
Thomas McChesney.
Yes.
Barbara Rice.
Yes.
William Tucker.
Yes.
Joseph Sauerwein.
Yes.
Timothy Drusher,
Yes.
John Flanagan,
Yes.
William Tyne,
Yes.
Patrick Dolan,
Yes.
Dominic Vernelli.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Okay. We now have 2 agenda items coming up with regard to more restrictive local standards from the town of Brookhaven. We'll begin with agenda item number 9, which is a solar-ready roof requirement. And I'll ask Nick to come up and walk us through it. This is local law number 2 of 2016.
Mr. Fiegel?
Yes, Mr. Sauer.
If I might, in the interest of full disclosure, I worked for the town of Brookhaven for 27 years. I've been with Ryan for over 7 years at this point.
Okay, Mr. Sauer, thank you.
The town of Brookhaven submitted this petition, I believe back in April. They submitted it 50 days late, which did not meet the Executive Law 379 requirement of 30 days. The law requires certain provisions to be made to new residential dwellings. They're trying to make the home more readily accommodate solar panels. They have some construction requirements. They're very minor, but they are construction requirements. They're required to have a 6x8 clear area on the outside of the building to accommodate the electrical panel or the solar inverters and associated equipment. This area cannot be near gas mains, windows, shrubs. Cannot be on the south side of the building. The panel has to be sized, it has to be large enough to accommodate the PV system, excuse me. The roof has to be designed such that it's sufficient area to generate a substantial percentage of the electric needs of the building. The roof materials must accommodate the installation of the PV system, and all obstructions of the roof, such as chimneys, vents, fans, pipes, they'll have to be pushed either towards the gutter or the ridge line. So since the town enacted this local law, they recently came back, recently being yesterday, they said that they no longer wish to enforce this local law. They would much rather enforce Appendix U of the IRC instead. Appendix U of the IRC does not have any construction requirements. It's just really documentation. Appendix U would essentially, on the construction plans that are submitted to the town for a permit, it would identify where solar panels could be installed. It would give the roof loads what they were designed for. It would have all these requirements pretty much packaged up and bundled up front, such that a new homeowner 10, 20 years down the road could look at this package and they would know where they could put their panels, where they could run their pipes, their chases, and they would have had already completed those steps. It would basically save those people a little bit of money in the long term. So the town much likes, they like the Appendix U much more than their current law. So they requested, I think we sent you the letter, they requested that, in essence, you, I guess, deny the local law because they do not plan on enforcing it. They plan to pursue Appendix U instead. So, in a nutshell.
Thank you, Nick. So being as this law is still on their books, we're going to take an action just, even though they're saying they're not going to enforce it. The recommendation is to deny, to make sure that they can't at any point in the future, correct?
Yes.
Are there any other questions, comments from Albany? Okay. Hearing none. Any from New York City? Hearing none. Any from Buffalo? Hearing none. I have a motion to deny this application made by Mr. Sauerwein.
Did you want to make the motion?
Do you want to speak?
No, I would like to make the motion to honor their request to deny this MRLS. I'll say nothing else.
Second.
Second.
Just for clarification, I believe their letter, I want to make sure you understand that, requests that the petition be withdrawn, not a request that it be denied.
I'll change my motion. I would just make a motion to deny the
I'm sorry.
petition of the town. Okay.
Yeah, the denial was after phone conversations with the town.
Okay, Mr. Sauer makes a motion to deny. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Flanagan. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Just for clarification, we're denying their request for us to consider a more restrictive law, correct?
Denying the
The
petition.
application, right?
Denying the
Thank you.
petition. Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Ask Gerard to call the roll.
Tebow.
Aye to deny.
Paul Martin.
Yes.
Joseph Bloswood.
Yes.
Keith Wen.
Yes.
Thomas McChesney. Yes. William Tucker.
Yes.
Too close to the other
Gonna
name.
start to get personally offended here.
Joseph Sauerwein.
Yes.
Tim DeRusha.
Yes.
John Flanagan.
Yes.
William Tang.
Yes.
Patrick Dolan.
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The MRLS is denied. I will ask the code division to transmit that fact to the town of Brookhaven. And Nick is going to stay up there and take us through the second one, which is digital displays for CO alarms, local law number 19 of 2014. Go ahead.
Yes, the Code Council had actually seen this petition back in March when we adopted the Uniform Code. It requires, of all the carbon monoxide detectors in a dwelling, it requires one of them to have a digital display that reads the CO limits, or the CO detection. It's starting at 30 parts per million. The alarm does not sound at 30 parts per million. I believe it sounds at 50 parts per million. It just shows you what the levels of CO are, low levels. There do not appear to be any special conditions in Brookhaven that would warrant this. It's stated that their buildings are constructed tighter. Well, they all are. We recently adopted the Uniform Code. We now have 3 air changes per hour. Aside from that, there does not seem to be anything different in Brookhaven that is special and exclusive to Brookhaven. So, at the last meeting, we recommended a denial. We had 8 votes to 3. It was, if you could remember, we were adopting the Uniform Code. We did not have all the members here, so we changed the agenda items around to give enough people time to show up to adopt the Uniform Code. So this agenda item was pushed to the front, and not all the members were here. Our position is the same. We recommended denial. We discussed this with Brookhaven. They did not want to attend today. We said let the chips fall where they may. We reached out to them after the last meeting, gave them excerpts from the transcripts, and said, you really need special conditions, what do you want to do? And they said, submit it back to the council as is. So this is part 2 of the MRLS saga.
Thank you, Nick. Any questions or comments from Albany? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from New York City? Hearing none. Any questions or comments from Buffalo? Hearing none. I guess I'm seeking a motion.
I'd like to make a comment.
Okay, Mr. Sauerwein's comment.
I still believe that every municipality has a right to determine their own future, and MRLSs should be more readily approved. Even so, I don't see what the benefit would be for having one CO detector having a digital readout. Many members of the fire service are somewhat mystified to some degree. I believe Lieutenant Lucchese can even speak to this if he cares to. by this rather complex issue of carbon monoxide, low level but extended exposures and so forth. And what exactly do those numbers mean? What is 30? 30 parts per million, 30%, 30 days till the battery runs out? Yeah, I just don't understand what benefit there would be to making people spend an extra, I don't know, $30 or $40, whatever they indicated was the cost here. The important thing is that the carbon monoxide detectors are in there, and when they activate, the occupants take the appropriate action. But I don't see any benefit to having this as a requirement in Brookhaven Town. There's nothing that prohibits somebody who perhaps is a health professional or somewhat more attuned to the intricacies of carbon monoxide exposure from getting any type of instrument and adding it if they are so inclined. So I would not be in favor of approving this particular MRLS request.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. I'm seeking a motion to deny this MRLS petition.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Martin makes the motion.
May I suggest that in this case, the motion be coupled with a finding that there are no special circumstances in the town,
To expand.
and accordingly, the application should be denied.
Okay, Mr. Martin makes the motion.
Motion to deny for the basis that the petition failed to convince the council that the special conditions exist in the town of Brookhaven to warrant the MRLS.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. A second, please.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Flanagan. Is there any discussion on the motion? Going once, going twice. Okay. I'll ask Gerard to call the roll.
Matt Tebow.
Aye to deny.
Paul Martin.
Yes.
Joseph Palumbo.
Yes.
Keith Wyman.
Yes.
Thomas McChesney. Yes. Barbara Rice.
Yes.
William Tucker.
Yes.
Joseph Sauerwein.
Yes to deny.
Timothy Drusha.
Yes.
John Flanagan.
Yes.
William Tyne.
Yes.
Patrick Dolan.
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Petition is denied. I'll ask the Codes Division to transmit that back to the town of Brookhaven. Okay, we're moving on to agenda item number 11, an update on previous public comments made at the June 2nd, 2016 meeting. Gerard, this is you.
This is me. Miriam actually prepared the hydrogen fuel cell memorandum you see here. The people were here from Toyota and Hyundai at the last meeting looking for us to make changes to the code that would allow hydrogen fuel cell vehicles in New York State. At that time, their requested changes were to the 2010 Uniform Code. And when we started looking into this, Miriam discovered that a few years back, California had adopted these standards, and they had worked with, I guess, ICC, and it ended up the current codes that we're adopting have those provisions in them. So there really isn't anything new that we need to do currently, and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles will be able to be used in New York State under the codes that we have in place. And there were a few, let's see, just wanted to let you know that we contacted Port Authority and also MTA, who, they have some regulations that don't allow not just hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, but I believe some other things like compressed natural gas vehicles in their tunnels and in their lower levels of a couple of bridges. And they're actually having a study done, Port Authority's having a study done right now, so they can look at whether they're going to change their rules. So really, we don't have to do anything. I just wanted to bring you up to date that the infrastructure, I don't know if it's in place, but it's going to be allowed under our current codes. And I also wanted to touch base on, there were a couple of other presentations of public comment in the last, one was in regard to automatic pool safety covers by Dr. Jens Pronikow. And he has presented a couple of times. We are aware of this issue and that we need to analyze it and try to identify whether we believe his request is that we allow automatic pool covers to replace, if somebody has those in place, to replace the need for a barrier and gate. And we're still digging into that to make sure, checking with other states and with national agencies that have recommendations in regard to pool safety. So we are going to revisit this, and we just wanted to let you know that we're not letting it drop, and we just didn't have time between meetings. And the other one that we had, which is very important, is we had a public comment regarding water efficiency standards. And again, we've done some research, but we still haven't contacted, had the opportunity to contact a few of the resources that we wanted to feel comfortable moving forward with this. But we definitely want to complete that research between this meeting and the next meeting and be able to come forward with something for the Code Council. And that's it for previous public comments.
Okay, thank you, Gerard. Is there any questions, comments on this discussion point before we move on? Hearing none, that brings us to the public comment period, I believe.
We do have two people that would like to speak.
Okay.
One is, make sure that I've got her name right here, Patricia Weiss. I believe she's going to be in New York City.
There she is. Ms. Weiss, welcome to the Code Council.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank you for your work, and I'm very impressed with everything you do. I wanted just to tell you how I look at this. I'm an attorney in private practice. I'm in Sag Harbor, New York. Sag Harbor is in Suffolk County. Half of it is in town of Southampton, half of it is in town of East Hampton. I wanted to talk to you about more restrictive local standards and the ones that I think are very important and seem to come up a lot. One has to do with occupancy. It has to do with infestation, whether if that would be the landlord's responsibility or the tenant's responsibility in a single-family house. It has to do with change of use for a room. If something could be a sleeping area, but the architect's plans called it a den, and now it wants to be. So I wanted just to talk, my comments are going to be regarding that. A few years ago, the Attorney General of the state of New York made a settlement with several lenders who didn't admit any wrongdoing for predatory lending practices, but did give New York a lot of money. That money is now in the process of being given out to towns and municipalities. Southampton town is eligible for $175,000 for code enforcement, property maintenance, which is exactly what your committee looks at, your council looks at. Binghamton, I heard, is even getting more than $175,000. So I would like to see that before the millions of dollars are given out for code enforcement, that what is actually going to be enforced is not a local, more restrictive local standard that never appeared before this code council, but actually the state codes that they are supposed to be enforcing. Example, Southampton Town has a law that limits occupancy to 2 persons per room, no matter what the size of the room. In other words, they don't look at like an architect plan or a diagram. They just have a flat limit. This particularly affects lower income people, people who want to live together with a friend to send their children to school. Maybe the 2 kids are gonna, live together, or more than 2. I mean, a room that's 20 by 10 that might look like it's gonna be the master bedroom could actually, under the state code, be a room for 4 children, and the couple could live in a room that is 10 by 10. So let me just review occupancy under New York state code. It's property maintenance 404, and the minimum of tiniest room can be is 70 feet per 1 person, and other than that, just 50 square feet per person. Riverhead also has a law that they just made up their own numbers. Okay, Southampton says to have 2 people, a room has to be 120 square feet. That's different than property maintenance code 100 square feet. Riverhead has a law that says for 1 person it has to be 80 square feet, and for 2 people it has to be 120 square feet, and no matter how, and for 3 people 180 square feet. Okay, that's just an example, but I just wanted to not take you through everybody's code, but to tell you that as different municipalities have adopted the code, they have said unless you have stricter exceptions. So here's what I'm proposing. Number 1, I would like to see the Code Council work with the Attorney General, who's giving out all this money, and I would like some kind of assurance for the Attorney General to receive that what will be enforced is really the code. So I would like a questionnaire sent to the town attorneys where they have to go through their code and swear that it comports. Now, if it doesn't comport, which I think is pretty much going to be the case, then I think perhaps Code Council will consider an amnesty program. In other words, if somebody didn't submit it to Code Council within 30 days, which is completely likely, that in order to receive this money, Code Council will get another opportunity to consider this. The third thing that I would like... Yes.
Ms. Weiss, if I could stop you for a second. I think Mr. Sauerwein had a question for you.
Okay, great.
Pardon me for interrupting you, ma'am, but I don't have a question, I have a concern. Perhaps
Yes.
council can advise us. It sounds like we're almost getting into a situation where potential litigation or other administrative action would be contemplated, and that is far from the purview of this Code Council, and I wonder if it's inappropriate for us to continue hearing this.
I don't think it's inappropriate.
Excuse me, ma'am, I directed to the counsel for the Code Council.
I don't see, I guess you can always sue, but I don't see this involving potential litigation involving the Code Council or the Department of State. My understanding from what we've heard so far is that there's a desire that the Attorney General be approached and advised of the need to enforce the state code and not a local version of the state code.
Exactly.
perhaps to be advised that a local government that adopts a more restrictive construction standard must come to the Code Council for approval of that local construction standard.
Exactly. I'd like to see that a little bit better coordinated. But Mr. Sauerwein, since I live in the Southampton area, I won't mention them again. How about Westbury? Westbury apparently put it was in the paper in Newsday, a 5-bedroom limit for sleeping areas. So to me, if a house had 8 bedrooms, now they want to have 5 bedrooms, and they want to limit it, and they could have reasons, I think they need to go through Code Council. One of the things that I wanted just to mention is when all these mortgage foreclosures started, a lot of law firms were jumping in and starting actions, and they didn't really know, some of them, where the note was, and who had it, and if it had been transferred. So there were rules beefed up in the Office of Court Administration that required the attorney for the lender that was foreclosing to sign an affidavit that was sort of a checklist. So I'm sort of suggesting something similar for Code Council to coordinate with the Attorney General, because I think this would be a really good time, because I mean, Brookhaven obviously knows about more restrictive local standards. I think for the most part, the other towns don't. My third last suggestion, is there is a newsletter called the Association of Towns and Villages, and they report Attorney General's opinions, and a lot of people get it and read it. A lot of the small villages don't have a full-time local lawyer, but they may be subscribing to that. And I would like to see Code Council maybe beef up their press or PR and to kind of get the word out, because all the good work that I see you doing with passing laws and fine-tuning the attic rules, I don't really think that's getting out there. Apparently the Attorney General has asked to see some kind of a roster for the last 3 years, what's been prosecuted in the local justice courts in the different towns, and you may be able to get a flavor from that of what's going on. We have very limited housing in Long Island. We have people moving there, they have no place to live. We have seen that when they talk about affordable housing, they talk about things that are still very expensive and out of reach for a lot of people. So it's important that we have rental housing and rules that support that. So that's my suggestion, that we look at this money coming in as an opportunity, and perhaps even some of that money could go to the people in the Department of State that work with you, that are very knowledgeable in more restrictive local standards. And I'm not suggesting that they just pour through every code book in the 1,000 municipalities, but I think at least they could, this might be a good time to have the local attorneys do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weiss. Actually, all local laws are filed here at the Department of State. So with regard to the municipalities that you mentioned, we can take a look and see if there's anything we believe is more restrictive than the code itself, and we can go from there.
May I add litter and sheds? I've seen the state minimum for sheds. You don't need a building permit if it's 144. You do need it in some other municipalities. There can be a blight mitigation surcharge for litter. And I think litter, you have to distinguish between keeping your own property clean, which is certainly in your area of the property maintenance code, versus not throwing, a soda can on someone else's property as you're going by. I mean, those really have to be untangled. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to respond. This is Gerard Hathaway. We talked on the phone.
Yes.
And one of the things that I would like you to do is, could you send a hard copy of your comments to me? You sent me some previous information, but a hard copy of the comments from today. And did you fill out an appearance form? I don't know if there are any there in New York City, but I can send you one by email so you can fill that out.
Thank you.
I also had mentioned to you as you know, the size and capability of our of the division to be able to go out and find out every town and village and community who may have passed a local law would be very difficult. You brought up, I think, 4 municipalities that may have a situation, and I recommended that you file a complaint, because in filing a complaint, that lets us know then to check into those counties, and that's how some of these come to light for us. And that would be a suggestion on my part, is that you, as you file a formal complaint, you know, on the complaint form that's on our website, and then we can move along. You know, these that you've identified, we can probably reach out to them now because you described the situations pretty well, and see, you know, check with them, make sure, do you have a local law that's more restrictive? You need to send that in to us, that kind of thing.
Right. After we spoke, because I spoke to you and Brian Tollison, and I thank you for the half hour you spent with me, I found out about all this money coming in. And I thought, well, if there's money coming in to address blight and to address communities and to address code enforcement, perhaps this would be the appropriate time for Code Council to you know, get involved, because the Attorney General definitely has some money, and I can't imagine that they would want to give it out just, you know, to enforce more restrictive local standards that have never been approved.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Weiss.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have a second speaker today?
Actually, we have 3 more. Dominic Kosmaskis.
I'll withdraw my application. Thank you for the opportunity.
Very good.
Thank you.
Lou DeVue.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Here you go.
I'm Lou Dubuque, the Executive Vice President of the New York State Builders Association. I'd like to thank the Code Council for offering me the opportunity to speak here today. The New York State Builders Association, as you know, represents 2,200 members across New York State, mainly focusing on the residential construction industry. We're now roughly 40 days away from the full implementation of the 2015 Uniform Code with New York State amendments. NYSBA had our board meeting, our summer board meeting last week, and we listened to members from across our state raise concerns about our being prepared for October 3rd. The general agreement is that there's not been enough time to implement training for our builders. We've begun to ramp up training for our members this summer, but in reality, this is their busiest time of the year, and it's been incredibly difficult for them to take time off to receive training. Another issue I've heard from our members is that cross-referencing the mammoth 2015 Uniform Code with our 180-page supplement is increasingly slowing down their ability to get up to speed. Now we find out today that there will be a revised supplement. You can kind of see how our members are pretty confused. We've had discussions with code officials as well, and it's clear to us from those conversations that they are not going to be trained in time as well. I want to emphasize that NYSBA has been very supportive of the transition to the 2015 Uniform Code. Our belief from our president on down is that if you don't move forward, you're going to be left behind. But we also firmly believe that if we move forward with a full implementation of the code on October 3rd, we are looking at a host of major problems. We will work with the building code officials and the Department of State to assist our members in the transition, but everyone needs to understand that going forward, there's going to be some rough sailing ahead. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Gerard, you have one more?
Yes, but Department of State,
No, I wrong form.
you're withdrawing? Okay.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the public comment period for this meeting. Future meetings, don't jump up yet. The next meeting of the Code Council will be handled on November 17th, 2016. It will be in all 3 locations once again. And now I'm going to, as I guess a chair's moment here with regard to number 14, other business. I want to step back for a second because I think at least the Code Council and maybe I am a little confused as to where we're going with the temporary alternative use of certain buildings rule. What I seem to have heard as we worked through that and the voting that happened thereafter, what I seem to have heard is that we don't like it being so expansive. If that's the case, I'm wondering if there is a motion out there that would limit it to simply sugar shacks. I can throw out the language that I would have, and Joe, if you want to.
I didn't want to interrupt.
All right. Let me run through what I have in front of me here for a possible motion, and then we can discuss. So I'd be looking for a motion for the council to grant conceptual approval for the Codes Division to prepare final rule text of a rule defining the term sugar shack and allowing temporary alternative use of sugar shacks only. To prepare rulemaking documents for that rule, to obtain required approvals, to propose a rule, filing a notice of proposed rulemaking, conducting 1 or more public hearings, preparing rule analysis of public comments, and coming back to the Code Council in November with that rule for a possible vote. Does anyone want to make? Mr. Sauer.
We should not throw out the baby with the bathwater. I would make that motion, sir.
Okay, Mr. Sauer makes that motion. Can I have a second?
I'll second it.
Ms. Rice seconds that motion. Is there any discussion on that motion? Mr. DeRocher.
Can someone explain to me what you're defining as a sugar shack? And why this whole issue came up?
Sure. Nick, do you want to, or do you want me to do it? Come on up.
The hard part is we weren't here when it first came up.
Yeah.
Neither was I.
Yeah.
So I'm asking a question.
I was certainly not the chair of the Code Council at that time.
Develops the definition of the sugar shack.
Yes, I believe we would have to. Again, this rule was initially started years and years ago. It was proposed and morphed and it grew, and everyone else wanted a piece of the pie. Like I said before, it expanded to include different ag uses, producers of cheese and wine, and everything else, everything under the sun. So we're just trying to accommodate as best we could all these different uses and still put all the required safety measures in there, and that's where we wound up today.
You know, ag and markets
Ag and Markets
came in and wanted other farm producers to be able to benefit from this. Then barn wedding people. So it grew because of people saw the rule being developed. And
Did you
why
receive
not us?
Did you receive an email yesterday from Binghamton Fire Department?
Yes. I received a couple, like 3, I believe, responses to the, make sure I got the right one here. This was item 5.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay. Just a couple of responses from outside. This is from Clark Olson, Fairpoint. This is Olson Designs. This is a designer. Temporary use exceptions sound like common sense to me. I had personal experience in which such an allowance would have been a positive thing for all involved. Daniel Eggleston, Fire Chief, Binghamton Fire Department. Our fire department fully supports the temporary alternative use of certain buildings proposed rule It will be an extremely useful tool for many communities, including our own. And we did have one that I would call it constructive, not negative, from DOT, where the person said he believes this proposal was sought by the fruit growers of central New York, New York State. That's where he thought it came from during the harvesting season. They may turn a S-classified barns into M-classified areas for sale of fruit. However, what they did is they gave us specific things they would like to change about it. And one of the things they were concerned about is that there would be, things would happen in airplane hangars. And again, that's, if they read the whole rule, that's out right now. And we responded to comments that came, especially from NYSBAC, over the period of time in between. And, we tried to include the people we could, rule out the ones that seemed too dangerous, as brought up by comments in between. And, we came up with what we came up with. But I believe one of the biggest proponents of this is Ag and Markets.
And sugar shacks would be producers of maple syrup. We have to obviously expand upon it.
Okay. So the Code Council has made they have voted on the expanded rule. So the question is back on just whether we're dealing with sugar shacks, as Nick just threw it out there, for maple syrup producers. So we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any other discussion on this before we take a vote?
I'm not clear actually what we're doing anymore, because
Okay, go ahead.
we want to go forward with rulemaking, but we don't even know what the text of that may ultimately look like, because I think if you're trying to narrow it, this isn't going to be ultimate technical text in the end,
Right.
by any means.
No.
I think it would be a much simpler version of that. It would be the difficult task of defining sugar shack, perhaps using a different term, and then allowing temporary alternative use of those buildings and only those buildings with some safeguards. Sugar shack, many of them in the state now, they like to have a sugar weekend in the spring. Comes in and has a pancake breakfast and samples their maple syrup products. And oh, by the way, perhaps buys some maple syrup over there. And they were perhaps the first group that asked for this kind of exception, because they were faced with the situation where people would come into their building and for those purposes during very short periods of time. In many cases, some cases, perhaps not all cases, the local code officials have decided the building does not meet all of the code requirements for a building that is in a public assembly. Those are people who are eating breakfast, and it's not for a mercantile, people are buying for fire. So we're attempting to accommodate them by coming up with a rule that would allow for use of those buildings during a limited period of time, provided they came up with some basic safety features. As an alternative to bringing their sugar shack into full compliance with all code requirements applicable to assembly spaces and burning point spaces.
Mr. Martin?
Yeah, I'm not hung on the sugar shack versus issue really, because I understand the broader implications of temporary use of agricultural buildings for other purposes, because we heard, everything from the barn wedding to the wine and the cheese and so on. So really my philosophical issue is temporary use of agricultural buildings, which generally agricultural buildings get a wide lane given to them, if you will, from the code. And now we're going to do something other than agricultural use in them. I do think we need to have some sort of a temporary use in that. But what happened is, again, in an attempt to accommodate everybody, we cast a wide net. I think that caused some agita on the part of the council. We heard that. I think if we narrow the scope back to temporary alternative use of agricultural buildings, I think we can get back into a comfort zone. I'm just leery of going too far with a process when we don't know what that technical document's going to look like. And I don't, yeah, somebody, please, Joe, can advise me the reason to move forward with the process, the regulatory process, without the instruction sheet behind it yet. Is there,
I
do
guess
we
the-
gain anything by doing that?
What we gain is, again, we're coming to the Code Council under this motion in November for vote. I mean, you can say yes or no vote. Why is that important? Well, the alternative is nothing will be done until March of next year, and that's during or after the sugar season. So if you want to accommodate the industry that has the sugar shack, and I don't want to use that term if that's not an acceptable term, but to accommodate their upcoming sugaring season, it's kind of, if we don't do something in November, we're going to miss it. So it would be Codes Division coming up with rulemaking documents, and the Code Council may in November say, you know what, we don't like it. Okay, well, at least we've tried. But if we don't do anything, if we don't move forward with the conceptual approval, of which has been requested now, we're going to miss the next sugaring season. Unless the Code Council would like to come back for a special meeting at Christmas.
I'm just having a conceptual problem, just trying to understand is there, number one, really a problem? And if it is a problem, there's nothing in the code currently that allows jurisdictional, discretion and use of, or whatever else. It's hard to understand.
Typically,
we're trying to make this language just specifically for.
Well, I think typically someone who's trying to make sure they're, be on top of it, probably just won't allow it. And then there might be jurisdictions who say, these things happen, we're just going to turn the blind eye.
I would submit that probably happens every place now. There's pancake breakfast in probably every single firehouse around the state.
I believe it happens many places, but not every place.
Yeah.
So.
Can I make a comment? Because I'm from an area where this is an important part of the local economy, and it's important for maple producers to be able to do this. You're correct. It is going to go on, regardless of whether or not there are standards, and I think it's important to have standards and to address this. So that would be where I'm coming from on this.
And just a quick verification, I know we were talking about we should limit this down to maybe sugar shacks, but to get that rule in place, and we also referenced agricultural buildings, and really a sugar shack itself may not be an agricultural building. It's a process that's going on in that building. So if we limited it to agricultural buildings, some of these other products, they wouldn't be included.
So is there any further discussion?
I got a question from New York City. It's Pat. Is the motion being made to bring this to the council for a vote in November? Is that what the motion's for?
The motion allows the Codes Division to develop the new rule text, which would then be proposed, but also brought back to the council to adopt in November. So it would be an up or down vote. It would give the sugar shacks, the people who run the maple sugar industry, basically a one-shot deal.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Bill Tyne in Buffalo. I would like to see this move forward. I'd like to see staff develop this. I think it's very important, certainly for the rural communities in the western end of the state, south, I think all across upstate. There's a lot in the maple sugar production arena. New York is a very big producer of this. It's sort of a very festive kind of atmosphere that's created by trying to get advertising out, get people out from the more urbanized areas and out into the countryside to see how maple sugar is produced, how trees are tapped, how this stuff is brought in and then brought in and processed in these sugar shacks. It's I think the intent of it was really good, and the creeping extension of the uses is what gets us into these problems. So I don't have a problem if it extends beyond sugar shacks to other agricultural uses, as long as the general intent of using these buildings on a very temporal basis. And generally speaking, I think for the most part, in my personal experience, it hasn't been going to pancake breakfast. It's been people coming out and, you know, walking through and touring a small sugar shack, getting in a horse-drawn cart and going through the woods and seeing the trees being tapped and the tubing that conveys the sap back to the sugar shack. It's that kind of atmosphere. It's a learning, educational experience for kids. It's a great family experience for folks, and it's very important to the local economy. And whether that's in the wine industry, whether it's in the fruit industry, whether it's in the maple sugar industry, I don't think it matters, as long as it isn't being pushed so that it's large-scale occupations of buildings that require much greater safety issues on a much more permanent basis. If that's what people want to do, then start building more established, more grandiose structures and follow more technical codes. But you know, this sort of on some level goes back to the issues we spoke about with Brookhaven and talked about in Riverhead with all these other uses. When we start looking at all these changes, the whole point of the code is that we have a uniform code across the state, and that builders can build in any location and know what the rules are. And I have no problem with us looking at alternative standards and evaluating them on a case-by-case basis that doesn't create grand extensions of precedent. But you know, we need to be logical about these things. We need to be rational about these things, not throw out, I like that phrase of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, crippling an industry that started the whole thing just because everyone, I guess the word to use, got a little too greedy. And so we really need to reel it back in and work on that language, and I would encourage staff to get that proposed language out to us early, not the day before the next Code Council meeting, so you can get input from the Code Council members and we can make this happen in November and not have it get tabled, not have it not happen before sugar season. And you know, I think it's important that it goes forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tyne. I agree.
Solely sugar shacks, correct?
That is the motion right now. Mr. DeRocher.
Just to clarify, I'm not objecting to any specific industry. As a matter of fact, I go to these places all the time. I see them all over. My real question is there really a problem that we have to go through and put criteria, legislation, criteria down specifically for these buildings? And if everyone is saying, yes, there is, I'm in favor of doing something very simple, but I have not heard yet that this is a statewide problem that for a very short period of time it happens. It's been happening. It's happened last spring, and it's continuing to go on. I'm trying to find out if there's a problem. If there's not one, then
is
I'm just wondering what we're doing here.
I would probably then echo what Ms. Rice said. It is happening. You're saying it's happening.
Yeah.
And it's happening without any safety standards other than what the building was constructed for in the first place. I mean, these buildings may not be currently in a place where it is safe to have people milling around. So I think development of a rule is a good thing in that it gives that perhaps an extra added protection that's not currently in place. It gives that code enforcement official a reason to be there, to check things out, to require certain safety measures.
As opposed to requiring them to turn a blind eye to something and just kind of let it happen.
Right. And sadly, we know that occurs as well.
I mean, in my hometown area, the farmers have big weekends at a farm where they put up tents and things for people to eat at. They conduct tours all through their barns, all their processes. A lot of it's probably outside, but certainly some of it is going through each of their different barns and their livestock. And again, if there happens to be, because agricultural buildings are not strictly agriculture, don't have to be built according to the code or get a permit in most places, you don't know what they're going through. But if the building code personnel get to come in there and use some kind of a framework to be able to call out you've got to do this, or you've got to have a plan, a safety plan in place. That's really what this was all about.
The chairman just mentioned these wedding barns. There's a lot of people that are looking to go have a wedding in a barn someplace. It goes on every day out there. You see invitations. Depends on where you are. They're going to use those barns or those sheds or something. The apple guys, they go out and they got a little shed out on the side. They sell apples and stuff. Invite you in. Of course, they edit. They have the different things in there, but it's going on out there. It's an enforcement problem, and I don't know how you want to do it. That's
Well, at this point, the Code Council has turned down the idea of the expanded rule. So I guess at this point, it's just whether the Code Council wants to at least move forward in the process to figure out if this can be done for a limited group, which is being called the Sugar Shacks, the maple syrup industry, basically, who brought this to us in the first place, presumably because they did not want to be in violation of the current and now future code. Is there anyone else who wants to speak before we move on to a vote? Paul?
Yeah, I know, I don't even remember the exact wording of the motion that's on the floor, but I'd like to at least consider an amendment to that motion and come off of the Sugar Shack focus and look a little bit broader into that agricultural use. To support the agricultural thing. Because I think if we go through all this effort, we very narrowly define it to Sugar Shacks, next spring we're going to have another special interest group asking for us to go through this exercise. So I think we need to broaden a little bit, just perhaps not as far as we went.
Would that include barn weddings?
I'm sorry?
Would that include barn weddings?
I'm comfortable in that aspect, because I think it goes back to, it's certainly my recollection of what the history here was, which is, again, take buildings that by and large had been unregulated, even in their construction, because they were a barn or an agricultural building, had very little code oversight, if any, and now we were really introducing the public into them, rather than the owner or employees. So that's really the audience, I think, that type of building.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair?
Mr. Wen, hold on one second. Mr. Sarowine asked a second ago to speak.
We're getting right back to where we were, so accordingly, I would move the motion.
Okay. Motion's withdrawn. Mr. Wen.
Yeah, so I think the weddings and the tours are happening today. And the local jurisdiction, it's probably not looking at that, or they're allowing it. I'm just afraid that by having rules in place, but only allowing tours or breakfast or lunch or something, but not allowing wedding, the problem is that then if they want to have a wedding, they will receive violations from the local jurisdiction. The local jurisdiction will be compelled to act on it, versus in today's situation is really up to them to whether to allow that or not even asking. So I think that's the risk that we're taking if we're really going to put this onto paper, black and white.
Nick, why don't you, I'm going to try to address that, and then Nick can jump with me here. We're talking about not necessarily the use, but the building, right? We're talking about
Use of the building.
the use of the building, right?
An existing building to be used for something that it wasn't designed and constructed for.
But in the case of, let me just try and wrap my mind around this for a second. In the case of just Sugar Shacks, let's just stay there for a second. They could be used, if this were to go through, they could be used for breakfasts, tours, etc. They could also be used, I guess, for a wedding on one of those days.
Sure. If approved by the code enforcement official, if they apply for this and they do that, that wouldn't work.
Okay.
If they were to apply for a pancake breakfast and tours and what, they can do this. They couldn't turn around and go ahead and do a wedding.
Okay.
Because when he would do his inspection, he would be looking for hazards associated with this proposed use. I wouldn't be looking for people dancing on the ceiling because it's not a wedding. It would be pancakes. Follow me?
I got you.
This is Bill Tyne in Buffalo.
Go ahead, Bill.
I think we're getting away again from what the original concept was here. Yeah, and frankly, I won't suggest that I've toured every sugar shack in the state of New York. I'm sure there are exceptions to it. But the ones I've been through, and I've been through quite a few, are quite literally shacks. And they're small. They're out in the woods behind someone's farmhouse where they have a forest of maple trees and they're harvesting sap and then processing it. And they're letting a few people in at a time to see what goes in. They set up a small little counter with a cash register with some of the product of, whether it's maple butter or whether it's maple syrup or whether it's, the various stages in the distilling process as the water's drawn out of it and it becomes more and more concentrated, where people can sample the different stages of the process and see what it's like. They're small-scale operations, and they're over a weekend in the springtime. And so if we're keeping it to those kind of uses, making it a wedding hall is a very different deal. If you want to run a banquet hall and have weddings out there and have a caterer come in or do it yourself, that's a whole different operation. That's the sort of thing where you're building big buildings and you're running it all year long because people can get married any time. It's not tied to an agricultural use that's very specific to a season. It now becomes a business. So build it to code for that use and do it. But this is an issue of people saying, I've got a little agricultural use and I want to let people come in and see it over a weekend and not have to start, tearing it down and building a building. I just want them to see the shack. I want them to see the corn stand. I want them to see my little, crate that I sell apples out of. It's that kind of an operation we're talking about. And now, again, we're getting it out to other uses and making it more grandiose and larger. Maybe there is a place that has pancake breakfast and they've got a bigger shack. Even that, if it's in sugar season, it's over one day, a Saturday and a Sunday, or 2 weekends in a row. That's a lot different than saying we're going to have pancake breakfast every Saturday all year round, and so let me do that and make it an allowed use in this building that I use every weekend all year long. You've got to let some rationalization apply to this, some logic apply to this, not get so far afield of what the original intent was. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tyne. Okay. So, we seem to be a very split council right now. Why don't we try? I'll throw out the motion again. We'll try a limited for this purpose in this building type. We will attempt as a staff to define it, which I think is going to be challenging if I've heard my counsel correctly. I did. He confirmed for me. But let's see if there is any consensus on the council for that action. So again, I'd be looking for a motion because the last motion has been dropped, just in case we all missed that. But the last motion was dropped, so I'm looking again for a motion for the council to grant conceptual approval to the Codes Division to prepare rule text for a rule defining sugar shack, or we'll figure that out, and allowing temporary use of the sugar shacks only, to prepare rulemaking documents, obtain required approvals for proposing the rule, filing a notice of proposed rule, conducting one or more public hearings, preparing an analysis of public comments, and to come back to this council in November for an up-down vote on adoption of that rule. Can I have someone make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Ms. Rice makes that motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Lucchese. Do I dare ask if there's any more discussion? Hearing none.
I just have a question. So, very quickly. So this because I need to know what I'm voting on. So this motion has to do with sugar shacks only, and has nothing to do with other agricultural buildings, correct?
Correct. This would only be for the Codes Division to develop a rule with regard to sugar shacks, which was the original thing that was brought to us.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Thank God.
It's tough.
I know.
The amount.
I know the schedule. I know how tough this is gonna be. Okay. Gerard, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Pat Tebow.
Oh, yes.
Paul Martin. Joseph Lozero.
Yes.
Keith Wynn.
Yes.
Thomas Winchester.
Yes.
William Tucker.
Aye.
Barbara Rice.
Yes.
Joseph Sauerland.
Let me think here. Oh, yes.
Tim DeRusha.
No.
John Flanagan.
Yes.
William Tyne.
Yes.
Patrick Dolan.
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Motion carries. Thank you all. So with that, first I'd like to thank the council. I know this was a longish meeting. I actually expected it to go longer, so that was good. I want to thank Gerard. I want to thank Joe. I want to thank Nick. I want to thank Miriam and the rest of the code staff. This has been, trust me, a long summer to get everything ready and prepared for this meeting. I only had to deal with about half of what they went through, so I want to thank them. And then I'd like to call on Joe Sauerwein. He wanted to make a brief statement before we adjourn today.
Ladies and gentlemen, I beg your indulgence for just a few moments, because I'd like to share a few thoughts with you. In 2 months, I will mark the 20th anniversary of my 50th birthday. 2 months after that, I will have completed 52 years of service as a fireman. Now, that's nice and all, but what does that have to do with anything? Well, there's two things that means. First of all, I'm officially old. And secondly, unlike my colleague, Mr. Flanagan here, who I believe is the longest serving council member, code council member, and he's not showing any signs of slowing down, I'm starting to get tired. It's been a long time. This code process that we have all chosen to involve ourselves in, very complex, very dry. Some may call it dull and boring. And while I truly believe it is all of that, it mostly is extremely important and absolutely vital. Everything we say here and everything we do here in some fashion will impact the safety, health, well-being, and the very lives of the 20 million folks who call our great state home. We damn well better be making the right decisions for the right reasons. For over 13 years now, under 4 governors, whilst it hasn't always been my pleasure, it has also always been my distinct privilege to serve on this council. But I also believe that one must know when it's time to go. When it's time to make room for new ideas, new perspectives, maybe even a new way of doing the people's business. One ought not let ego stand in the way of progress. And I believe it's time for me to move on. Not to worry, there are many excellent members of the fire service out there who can be selected to serve on this council. And I hope that sooner rather than later, a selection will be made. As a matter of fact, one of them is right here. Jerry DeLuca from the New York State Association of Fire Chiefs is an outstanding potential member of the council. And I would strongly urge the governor's office to very seriously consider Chief DeLuca, and if not Jerry, then somebody of the same caliber was the experience, the education, and the passion that this task requires. Therefore, effective 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, I hereby submit my resignation as the Fire Service Representative to the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code Council. Boy, that's some mouthful. To all my colleagues on the council, to all the staff members of the Department of State, to all the other folks who have supported me and worked right alongside of me for these past 13 years, I say thank you very much for working to provide the best codes for the built environment in the state of New York. I wish you all success in your future endeavors, professionally and personally. And may the good Lord above, or whatever you call her in your own way, guide you in your deliberations as you continue serving the people of New York so very well, as they richly deserve. Thank you for your kind attention. My work here is done.
Mr. Sarwan, on behalf of the council, I'm certainly the Secretary of State, and I'm probably sure I can speak for the governor as well. I would like to thank you for your many, many years of service. I just met you this morning, and I already know that I lost something. I lost wise counsel, and whoever takes your place on this council will certainly have very, very big shoes to fill.
Yeah, Mark, and
So thank you. For all.
Thank you very much.
Who else?
Okay.
Two retired.
Ron.
Can I have a motion to?
He goes back to he's in Alabama now.
It's not 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, so I would make that motion, sir.
Second.
Thank you. Yes, certainly before anyone else retires. The motion has been made and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed, so we are adjourned until November 17, 2016. Thank you all.